It is the last game of the regular season. Earlier in the year, of course, maybe even before the start of the season, a lot of us thought that this game would have major implications towards either seeding or getting into the postseason. But it turns out that that is not the case. Both teams eliminated from the postseason, so this game doesn't really have much relevance in the terms of standings, but it's still Wings Panthers. It's still myself talking with another friend of mine from the media sphere, so it's worth doing. So another edition of the Tom Green Show, pregame edition for the Wings and Panthers here as the last game of the season. We have one of our returning friends, Jess Blaylock, with us. Jess, this has not been the year for either the Wings or the Panthers, but I would think that at least some positivity is the season's coming to the end and you're going to have a long off season.
Yeah, obviously, disappointing anytime you aren't participating in the playoffs. But you look at the Panthers and what they have done over the last 3 years in particular, three straight Stanley Cup final appearances, back-to-back Stanley Cup championships, the highest number of players to participate in the Four Nations Face-Off tournament, the highest number of players in the league to participate in the Winter Olympics. They have played a lot of hockey, a lot of tough hockey, a lot of physically demanding hockey, and think maybe it just caught up a little bit this year with the number of injuries that you saw the Panthers have to deal with, and not just the number of injuries, but the severity of the injuries, obviously starting with Alexander Barkov going down in training camp, which was a huge blow. And the
Almost
Panthers,
had that Lion King Simba meme. No, Simba!
yeah, the Panthers just never really could catch a break. Anytime you felt like you had a little bit of hope on the horizon, like getting a Matthew Tkachuk back in January. Seth Jones, goes down with a broken collarbone in the Winter Classic. So it was just a year of attrition as far as the injuries were concerned for the Florida Panthers, and that's really what ended up being the biggest factor in how this season played out for the Cats.
Absolutely. And before the season started, when I found out that Barkov went down, my thought was, okay, yes, it's horrible that Barkov is down, but they have 82 games to potentially figure out a replacement and lineups to do it. And unfortunately, it started the domino effect for them.
Yeah, and it's impossible to replace a guy like Alexander Barkov. First off, what he does on both sides of the puck. He's not only an important part of the Panthers' play at even strength, but he's a huge part of the power play. He's a huge part of the penalty kill. He's one of the best defensive forwards in the league. It's almost like having an extra defenseman out there when you have Alexander Barkov on the ice. He wins faceoffs. He's so strong with the puck. There's just so many things that losing an Alexander Barkov, there's so many ways that it affects your lineup. And then also, you're slotting maybe a guy like Anton Lundell, who could have been your third line center, to the top line, right? So now you don't have the same matchups with your third line that you have had in years past. That's been one of the biggest reasons why the Panthers have had success in the playoffs is their third line last year was Eetu Luostarinen, Anton Lundell, and Brad Marchand. That's the
Yes.
third line. You can match that lineup defensively with a team's top line. So it just losing a Barkov impacts so many facets of the game. And then it wasn't just losing Barkov, it was losing Barkov. No Tomas Nosek to start the season as well because he suffered an off-season injury. No Matthew Tkachuk for the first 4 months of the season. You lose Dmitry Kulikov, who has played over 1,000 games in the league, to a shoulder injury game 2 of the year. You lose Eetu Luostarinen for a stretch. Brad Marchand, who had such a great offensive season, ended up battling injuries. That just the I think of like in Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? The
Right.
boulder that comes at the beginning and it just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling, and injury after injury after injury. Seth Jones, like I mentioned in the Winter Classic, so at some point, and Paul Maurice said this all season long, you can You can survive 4 to 5 guys out of your lineup. When you get to the 7 to 10 range every night, I don't think there's a team in the league that's built to overcome that. I mean, look at the Red Wings,
Right.
right? In a playoff spot 95% of the season, you lose
Right.
Dylan Larkin and then you lose Andrew Kopp,
Yep.
and it's a huge impact on your team. And that's 2 players. The
Right.
Panthers are they were missing 14 players from their lineup the other night. Like, it's just impossible. You can only tread water so long, and then injuries just catch up to you. So again, I think if you only lost Barkov, it still would have been really, really difficult to replace him. But then when you lose Barkov and all the other players on top of that, I mean,
Right.
that is an almost impossible uphill battle to have to fight through all year.
Yes, and when when the Wings were on top of the division, it felt like they're finally going to break this now 10-year playoff drought. They might actually win a series too in the playoffs. And then all of a sudden the roof caves in, Dylan Larkin goes out. And what's crazy about this collapse is that the Red Wings had their best March in 4 years. They were still atrocious, only winning
Yeah.
5 games. It was, and also the thing about the Red Wings is they're going to finish 13th in the entire NHL. Yet they're still going to not make the playoffs because of a tough division with
Atlantic was brutal
individuals.
this year. Yeah, I mean, look at the number of Atlantic Division teams that are making the playoffs. Not just obviously Buffalo, Tampa, Montreal, but the 2 wildcard teams are Atlantic Division teams in the Boston Bruins and the Ottawa Senators. It's a good season to have played in the West, right? Like, if the Wings and Panthers actually down the final stretch, if they were a Western Conference team, would have been possibly battling for a playoff spot. But everything's cyclical. We've seen years where the West is an absolute wagon, and it just so happens this year, not only is the Eastern Conference just collectively tough, but the Atlantic Division in particular was just brutal, right? So it just kind of, it is what it is. And hopefully both of these teams will be back and stronger than ever, heading into next season.
Absolutely. If the Wings were in the Pacific Division, they would have won the Pacific Division.
Yeah, I
And
know.
yet the Ducks, the Knights, and the Oilers are all going into the playoffs. And of course, Edmonton having thoughts of potentially making a cup final run where they're 6 points behind Detroit in the
Yeah.
in the in the full league
I
stand.
think Edmonton, of any team, is just thrilled that the Panthers aren't in the playoffs, considering how the last couple of seasons have gone.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of fans around the league are happy with the Panthers not being in the playoffs. But if for those that are happy in the playoffs, you don't know what the Florida Panthers have been through for the past basically my lifetime, as I'm 30 years old. So they've deserved the last three playoff runs. And what I'll tell you before we get to kind of analyzing this game and making our picks is that I look back 3 years ago to a game that happened in March over my area's spring break between the Wings and Pens. The Pens were, I believe, 8 points up in the wild card. Detroit was 6 points back, and I believe the Panthers were 10 to 12 points back at that time. This was before they made the meteoric rise to the playoffs. I remember that Pittsburgh did not take that game very seriously, and the Wings needed that 2 points. The Wings won in regulation, and in my mind, I think I turn back to that game and think this could have spiraled the Pens downward and potentially the Panthers up into that spot, which caused which was the catalyst to this 3-year run.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, that Panthers. Are you talking about when Chicago ended up beating Pittsburgh and the
Yeah,
Panthers got the
yeah,
final wild card team by a
yes,
point? Yeah, and then
yep.
ended up playing Boston, obviously, in the first round.
They
And
made the most
uh,
historic upset in
yeah,
points wise in NHL history.
for sure, for sure. So, I mean, think about even that Boston series, right? If Brad Marchand scores on the breakaway and Boston ends up beating the Panthers, is Brad Marchand in Florida Panthers uniform today. I mean, there's so many trickle effects, right, from how things play out, obviously, but yeah, it's again, it comes back to it's been a wonderful, wonderful run for the Florida Panthers, and I'm had it not been for all of the just incredibly crazy injuries this year, I think we would have been talking about the Panthers heading to the playoffs once again. But they will rest up, they will recover this offseason, and I truly believe they'll come back in next year as a cup contender once again.
Absolutely. And I remember that Boston series. I think it was either game six or game seven. I was scrolling through Twitter and four or five different people were saying the same thing. This game is agonizing me. This game is taking years off my life. And I remember it was you, Meredith Gorman, and a couple other Boston, I think one other Florida and one other Boston media personality. I took a screenshot and I'm like, geez, everybody's thinking the same thing here.
Yeah. Yeah, it is yeah, absolutely. Playoff hockey is both the most wonderful thing in the world and the most stressful thing in the world. But you know, it should be a good one tonight. Obviously, it's still an
Absolutely.
Atlantic Division game. Um, Players still have a ton of pride. I know for the Florida Panthers, they've got a lot of guys currently called up from the Charlotte Checkers who are fighting to showcase what they're capable of. They have guys that are fighting for a roster spot. And I'm sure, you know, same from the Detroit perspective. Detroit is a team, an organization that's got a ton of pride. They're going to fight hard. So I think even though, like you mentioned, from a standings perspective, this game might feel meaningless, I still think that you're going to have two teams that go out there and truly knowing this is the final game that they're going to play this year, leave it all out there on the ice. A couple notes for the Florida Panthers. Matthew Tkachuk is returning to the lineup tonight. He and his wife, Ellie, welcomed baby girl the other night. So Matthew going in as a proud new dad in this final game of the season. No Gustav Forsling, who's been an absolute
Okay.
warrior for the Florida Panthers this year. I believe this is only the second game this season that he has missed. It's only the sixth game, maybe in the past 3 years that he has missed. So just complete respect and props to Gustav Forsling for just always being that warrior for the Cats. But he will be missing this one tonight. And then Tomas Nosek,
Former Red
broken
Wing.
leg,
And
another
yeah.
broken bone for the Florida Panthers. Broke his leg the other night on the penalty kill in the last 5 minutes of the game. Even came out for another shift after the broken leg, but he will obviously not be participating in this game as well. So you will see a lot of, once again, a lot of the guys that have been called up from the Charlotte Checkers. You know, the Mike Bennings, the Ludwig Janssens, the Marek Alshers. Guys that you're not necessarily used to seeing slotted into the lineup for the Florida Panthers, but guys that have been playing their butts off ever since they've been called up.
Absolutely. And for the Wings, I think it's a lot of pride tonight. And what's showing me that they're still playing with pride and not quitting is that 2 nights ago they faced a Tampa team that just won the division, and they took them to an extra frame. So I think that in the future, Todd McClellan is the guy for Detroit. I think they've played very hard, and we've seen. And I'm not going to compare it exactly to Coach Maurice, but I'm going to say that both these coaches are definitely unfiltered at times when it comes to what they have to say. Where we've seen that McClellan say "play effing hockey," etc., and Maurice has had his time of saying, I guess you've been in the huddles all the time. Tell me something PG-13 unfiltered. He said,
Well, I'm actually not near the huddles because I'm up on the desk on the suite
right.
level, so I don't have nearly as much of a perspective as I used to when I was down by the ice when I was sideline reporting. But I know we've seen some of the videos that emerged from the playoffs, and I remember in that first round series against the Boston Bruins, he got after the guys and he's like, "Oh, now you want to make plays? Now you want to make plays? No, pound their effing D." And it's a great line, and I know a lot of people quote that one. But yeah, Paul Maurice is just the best, and he has also just been amazing this season, leading the way, you know, through a really really tough year for the Florida Panthers, and always being just tremendous to work with. So we're very lucky to have Paul Maurice down here in South Florida.
And I also think of a Dan Campbell quote from when the Lions lost to the Niners in the NFC Championship game, and he had said, this could be the only time we're here. And I feel like Paul Maurice kind of has the same mentality of that, despite having been to three straight Stanley Cup finals, he would be one of the first to say, "Hey, this could be the only time we're here. Embrace it."
Yeah, he's very big on players, obviously working hard, but also appreciating and enjoying the moment. So, that's what you want to do with this one tonight. These guys recognize what an honor it is to play in the NHL, what a gift every single game is. So, everyone that's going to be in the lineup tonight, they're going to play hard, and I think they're just really going to try and enjoy this one, knowing this is going to be the last game that we play for a while.
Absolutely. So, well, we'll go to the proverbials here. Light the lamp. Who you got for the last edition of Light the Lamp for us and for this season?
Yeah, I'm going to throw two out there.
Okay.
Matthew Kachuk, because obviously guys come back and they just completely ride the wave on dad strength. Dad strength is a very real thing in sports, and so I think Matthew picks up a point tonight. Mackie Samoskevich as well, who was snake bit for so long, had the worst puck luck, and all of a sudden now is up to, I think it's 12 goals on the season, probably 6 or 7 of those scored in the last like week and a half, 2 weeks alone. So Mackie's been really hot. So I'll go Matthew Kachuk, Mackie Samoskevich would be my picks for the Florida Panthers.
All righty. And for Detroit, especially because of the Larkin injury, DeBrincat has been your points leader. So I'm going to go with DeBrincat to start. And, why don't I go Larkin as well? Because the captain is going to play his heart out in his last game
Yeah.
this season. So I might as well go with that. So it's again, this game in the way is irrelevant in the standings, but relevant to the players on the ice. Any game predictions tonight?
Um, any game predictions?
I got it.
I'm gonna say it's actually like a pretty tight game until the end, and I'll go Cats 4-2, but that fourth goal being an empty
Empty
netter.
netter. Yep, and I then honestly circling back to the Wings, I think that, and I know that some coaches are aggressive when it comes to pulling the goalie. Some coaches are more conservative. I think a couple of early empty net decisions for McClellan led to potentially either us, going down two on an empty netter early or losing a game early. I think it might have cost them 2 points, which would have been could have been meaningful now, but that's just my opinion. Red Wings, I will go 3-2 overtime, Detroit.
All
I
right.
will
All
go
right.
DeBrincat
Sounds like
to
it's going to
score.
be a good game then.
I will go DeBrincat to score. And if you are at Emirates Bank Arena tonight, you might want to take photos of the ice because this will be the last game in which the Stanley Cup Bowl will be on center ice because, well, sadly, the Panthers are out of the playoffs. So you might want to take pictures of that too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, with that all said, anything else that you may have to add towards this show, and or I'm sure you're looking forward to the off season, probably making a trip to Europe or two in the next
Yes.
few months.
No, I appreciate the time, and hopefully we just have a good game and everybody emerges unscathed heading into the off season because the Cats and the Wings have certainly dealt with their fair share of injuries this year. So just hoping that it's a good one, it's a fun one, and most important thing that everybody is still healthy after the game.
Yeah, that's the big thing, especially after the last game of the season, is that you want the full off season to rest. And some people will think that this could be the end for the Panthers. I don't necessarily think so.
Not even close. Not even close.
Yeah, I thought at the trade deadline they were in a selling position, but I knew that they were only going to sell someone kind of in the middle there.
Yeah.
Peaches was the guy that they sold off. They've still got a great core. I'm
Yeah,
not-
your window is not even remotely closed when you're returning a healthy Alexander Barkov, healthy Carter Verhaeghe, Sam Reinhart, Sam Bennett, Anton Lundell, Brad Marchand, Eetu Luostarinen. You go down the list. Dmitry Kulikov, Gustav Forsling, Aaron Ekblad, Seth Jones. Just go down the list of all these guys that are hurt right now. You come back healthy. You come back fully rested next season. Watch out. That's what I.
It also seems like that these, maybe dynastic isn't the right word, but these type of runs always have a blip year. Like for the Blackhawks in 10,
No
13,
doubt.
14, there was their blip year when they lost to the Kings. And this is the blip year for the Panthers
Yeah.
where they did not
Yeah.
make the postseason. So
For sure.
there we have it. So glad to have this show once again. If you're watching in Florida, Jess and I believe Joe Vo, if I'm correct, will be
That's correct.
on the call from Amerant Bank Arena tonight. If you're in the Detroit market, Chris Osgood, Daniela Bruce will be on the call. The last game in FanDuel Sports Detroit history, because the RSNs are phasing out. Thank you to all of those. It's a good, not goodbye. It's see you later on that and that, because most of the talent will be going to the other stations. Like in Florida, you have the Marlin Sports Network. We'll see where the Heat go. Detroit with the Pistons, we'll see where the Pistons go, but they have Detroit Sports Network. Nonetheless, thanks again, Jess. Let's have a great game.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. And we'll stop.